Last month, we listened as James told his readers about their responsibilities to and for one another. And some of what James had to say was hard for us to hear, as it challenged us to look beyond ourselves and to see the needs of the other and to see the other through a different lens. This month, the writer of the letter to the Hebrews tells us we need to look at Christ through a different lens, too. Believed to be written about 50 years after the crucifixion, there were Jews within these worshiping communities that claimed to follow Jesus Christ, who struggled to believe that Jesus was the divine being, the Messiah the disciples claimed him to be. They did not discount the many miracles that he performed or his message of love and peace he proclaimed. In fact, they embraced these as signs of hope. Yet as time passed, the faith communities began to formulate their own idea of who Jesus was. And this created a conflict between what we would call today the orthodox and the unconventional, the traditional and its alternative. We don't know who the author of this letter was, nor do we know exactly which community the letter is addressed, although most scholars will say that it was a worshiping community somewhere in Italy because of a couple of verses. But like the letter of James, it really doesn't matter. The message the writer shares is what is important. And that message is that in his life, death, and resurrection, Jesus removed the barriers and opened the door to reveal God's presence among us. And doing so gives each of us direct access to God. Over the next month, we will hear how the light of Christ, shining in our midst, overcomes the darkness around us, revealing not only the way to reconciliation, but the glory of God found within each of us. This light, we will hear, also reveals something else. It reveals our weaknesses and our desire for self-glorification. The writer of Hebrews will help his readers see that the only glory that is worth possessing is the glory of God. Glory revealed in and through Jesus Christ. It is as if the writer is holding up the light of Christ, as that wonderful hymn based on Psalm 119, verse 105 declares, "To be a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." The writer knows that without the light, it's hard to see beyond what is right in front of us. And if we can't see beyond the troubles that are right in our face, how are we ever to see the hope that lays ahead? Job, as our Old Testament reading this month will tell us, knew and saw this light long before it ever entered the world. Tried beyond human understanding, his faith, while it wavers, never fails. Because his faith is based upon something not that he can hold in his hands, but what he can see in his heart. How else could Job, who we hear today loses everything we as humans value, stand firm, trusting in God's goodness? A lot has been made of the probability that this story is not real, but a long and detailed parable. And that Job is not a real person, but an image created to show that struggle between the earthly and the divine within each of us. Whether reality or parable, the truth the story tells is that unless we look beyond ourselves, and to the light, to the glory of God, we will find ourselves consumed by that which seeks to devour us. The story of Job tells us that the light overcomes the darkness. Now some, like those who try to console Job, will argue that there is not enough light to overcome all the shadows in our lives. And therefore one must never trust so blindly in something or someone as God. In fact, they say one must first trust in themselves if they are to protect themselves from that which is unseen. But at the heart of their message, both Job and Hebrews will show that the light of God has the power to overcome all darkness. And it will leave no shadows except those we create for ourselves. Why would we create shadows? Because face it, we all have things in our lives we don't want people to see. There are things in our lives we don't want to see. In the gospel reading this month, we will listen as Mark tells how the light of Christ, the light of God that is in the world, the light that has come among us, how this light will overcome the shadows we create, forcing us to see ourselves as we truly are. And in doing so, the light of Christ will reveal our hypocrisy, our pride, our greed, and our blindness to these things. This month, we are asked to not only see what the light reveals about us and about God, but whether or not the light we let shine through us is pure or filtered. I think we all know the answer to that already. It's both. It's pure in that it comes from God, but filtered in and through us. So the real challenge we face is finding a way to peel back the layers of filtering we have accumulated throughout our lifetime, so that others might be drawn to the pure light that has power, as the prophet Isaiah declares, to transform us. And as the writer of Hebrews says, in such a way that when people look at us, they no longer see us, but God who is in us. Two questions we need to ask ourselves this month as we listen to the readings. First, do we lift our light for all to see it? Or do we hide it, like another version of our praise song says, under a bushel basket? Afraid that we might be seen as some kind of fanatic or some kind of crazy person. Or worse yet, we might see something about ourselves we are afraid to see. And second, what does the light we do hold up reveal about ourselves and about God to all who see it? Why this introspective look at ourselves? Why is it so important? Ready for the good news? In just 8 short weeks, we entered a season of Advent. A season when we look back at the birth of Christ and forward to his second coming. It is a time when we look at our relationship with God and with one another and we ask ourselves, have we been good and faithful servants? The time to ask that question is not when we stand before the judge, but at a time beforehand. A time far enough back we can affect change. Change in our lives, change in the lives of others. The readings that lead up to Advent, beginning with those last month, remind us of what being a good and faithful servant looks like. And prayerfully, the light within us will enable us to see those areas in our lives that we need to work on, to be better stewards of what God has given us, to help us strengthen our relationships and community, and to be faithful witnesses to the good news revealed, as the Gospel according to John says, in Jesus Christ, the one who brought the true light of God into the world. And as the writer to the letter of Hebrews tells us, so that we might not only share in the light's life-giving nature, but that we might share that light with those who do not yet see it. Brothers and sisters, let us not be afraid. Let us let that light within us shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.